Welcome to the mayhem. Dick and Lloyd mayhem. Media mayhem. Marketing a mayhem. You might love it, you might hate it. It's my favorite freaking show.
When you look back on the history of Kansas City television and all the great announcers that worked on camera and in the recording booths along the way and did the live stand-up commercials and hosted some of the local TV shows, there's a long list of names to go through. Today, Loy and I get a chance to talk with a guy who I believe was probably one of the happiest guys to be on television, and he had a long career proving that. And he's our guest. Loy, you know, we've talked to a lot of people here on this podcast, and it's about time we got down to talking to the real stars in the world. You know?
We got a star today.
We got a star, Fred Broski, TV guy, booth announcer, weather guy, author,
Game show host,
and probably one of the happiest broadcasters on television when he was on. Hi, Fred.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Did that cover just about everything?
I was an advertising entrepreneur also.
Oh, yes. All right. Sure.
But you started in radio, right?
I started in radio, KCKN Radio over on State Avenue back in about 1956 or so. My first job on radio that I got paid for. And it paid $2 an hour. I did a Saturday night show from midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm. What was their format back then?
Country music all the way.
Was it country?
They had the stars of Cactus Jack Call was there.
Yeah.
Herbie Hoflicker, Guy Smith. Dal Stallard actually was the program director there. And I don't know, you guys probably are not old enough to remember, but Dal Stallard used to be a radio star on the old KCMO radio back in the 40s and 50s when everything was live.
Yes, yes.
And I wanted to get into radio or television back in the middle 50s, and I started going around to the various TV and radio stations in Kansas City trying to find out how I could get on the job. And George Stump was a program director over at KCMO
Remember
Radio.
George, yeah.
And he said, Fred, I can't hire you here. I can't even audition. He says, because I have to hire people who are really, really professional and seasoned. He says, but it seems to me that you have interest in the business. He says, I've got a friend who used to work here, Dal Stallard. I used to listen to him on radio back in the 40s. I think he did the Dinner Bell Roundup Gang or something like that.
The great names they had.
So
back
anyhow,
then.
off I go over to KCKN, and it was in an old farmhouse over like 39th and State Avenue or something like that, out where the big shopping center was there, Indian Springs.
Yeah.
So I go in there and I knock on the door, and here's Dal Stallard, a huge guy. He's like as big as H. Roe Bartle. He's a huge guy, and just the nicest guy you ever want to meet. He says, Fred, he says, you know, it's a kind of interesting business you want to get into, but he says, it's a fun business. And I thought, was he such a big star that I used to listen to all the time? Here he is over at the farmhouse with a small KCKN AM and FM, which is really small at that time. I guess a pretty directional signal, and you couldn't really get them all over town. And it told me something about the business right from the get-go, that, you know, you work in it when you're young, but they don't always take care of you when you get in your senior years, and sometimes that's in your 30s and 40s. But anyhow, he was an old guy, probably 40 at the time. So he says, as long as you're here, he says, let's go upstairs to the studio and I'll cut a tape with you. Man, I've never been on tape before. So he goes up there and he puts a reel-to-reel thing, and he says, here, read this newscast. And I read it, and he says, read this commercial. And I did a decent job on it. And he shut the tape down. He says, you know, you don't really sound too bad. He says, you need to work on your delivery since you've never done it before. Mm-hmm. But he says, practice reading. And if you want to, you can come over and read anytime you want. Man, that's a heck of a deal. All of a sudden, I'm at a radio station. I can practice for free. So a couple of days later, I go over there, and the disc jockeys, they were kind of a lazy bunch as far as reading the news and things like that.
Yeah.
So Guy Smith says, why don't you go over there and you just read my 5-minute news capsule for me at the top of the hour. So 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd go over there and read it. They had it at the United Press World's Roundup. They had a 5-minute capsule. I'd read it every hour for about 3 hours. And so I was doing it for free. just for the fun of doing it, which is probably illegal now. It probably wasn't. So anyhow, I did that for a couple of weeks, and Dallas Stallard said I got an opening on the weekend, spinning records, country music. He says it's midnight, Saturday night till 6 o'clock Sunday morning. He says it pays $2 an hour. I says, I'll be here.
And you know, those don't exist anymore.
No.
Those shifts don't exist. Those people can't get in that way and do that. It's all pre-recorded on the computer. And those times to get that experience is not there. You were termed an intern back then is probably what they would have called you.
So I did that for a while, several months, I guess. And during the week, I had a job that I worked in clerical work. I did typing and things like that. And also, when I had extra time, I'd drive to Topeka, try to get a job there. I drove to Lexington, Missouri, try to get a job at, I think the station is KLAX.
Yeah.
I drove up to St. Joe, and I met a guy up there at KRAS was the name of the station there. I don't know if it's still KRAS. The guy's name was T. Casper, I believe. He really took a liking to me. So he said, I came on and I read the news for him a couple times. He says, you'd be my new news director. I don't know anything about news as long as I can do it.
News director, that's great.
I went to work for him full time, and I worked for him for about 3 weeks. And one of the announcers told me, he says, you know, they're auditioning for a TV announcer over at Channel 2 with the big tower up in St. Joe. And I think it's at 40th and Farron Street. So I went over there to audition for that job. And dang it, I got it. And it was really a neat deal.
KBQ, was it KBQ then?
Yeah, KFEQ at that time.
KFEQ, yeah.
That's KFEQ TV.
Yeah.
And so I went over and auditioned for the job, and I got it. And about, I don't know, 5 or 6 months later, I'm in the process of getting married all the time too. So I come back to Kansas City and I get my old job back. I leave Channel 2 and we get married, and I get a little apartment on the plaza. And well, I really miss my television, even only worked it for a few months.
Yeah, sure.
So I called the guy up there. I said, if you got any openings, I said, I'd sure like to get back in. I said, I don't care what it pays. And so about 2 or 3 weeks later, I told Jane, my wife, I says, if I get a phone call, we're moving. She says, even though we've only been married 4 weeks, I said, we got to do what we got to do. So dang it. I got the call, and off we go to St. Joe. And that was the start of my television career.
There you go. Wow.
Wow, and you can get, you probably were excited about the fact that people could get you in Kansas City on the St. Joe. I remember that because my dad watching the Cardinals game, flipping the channel with his toe.
Sure. Well, of course, that was my ultimate goal, to be in Kansas City, be on Kansas City television. And yeah, the St. Joe signal was Channel 2, so I think that it covers the curvature of the earth a little better than the higher channels. So we did get pretty good ratings in the northern part of the Kansas City metro area. As a matter of fact, I never did get to see the ratings, but we used to do a kids show called Cousin Freddie's Funhouse. Real neat name.
In St. Joe?
In St. Joe.
Okay.
So I did Cousin Freddie's Funhouse, and I did that for about a year and a half, and I had heard that we did have pretty good ratings in the northern part of the Kansas City area. And after doing that for a while, a year and a half, I moved later to Columbia, Missouri.
Yeah. Seems like it was Channel 2, the TV station in St. Joe.
Channel 2 in St. Joe.
Channel 2 is what it was. We'd pick it up
Channel
in the
2.
Northland where I lived,
Well, and a lot of people used to pick up different sporting events. They put a stick on top of their house and point it. I think it was maybe
the Cardinals were on there.
The Cardinals were on, and then also the Chiefs games used to be on some of the distant stations, and people in Kansas City area would put a stick on their house and point it towards either Pittsburgh, Kansas, or possibly Sedalia sometime to get the Chiefs games.
Yeah. Wow. When you came to Kansas City, how did that move come to TV again? Channel 4 or so?
I was working, after I left Channel 2 in Columbia,
I
went to work for KOMU TV in Columbia, Missouri.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Channel 2 in St. Joe, then I moved to Columbia, Missouri. It was a university station. It was owned by, it was KOMU TV. It was owned by the University of Missouri. Worked there for a great boss. His name was Glenn Griswold. When I first went there, he hired me to do the weather show and to do commercials because everything was live. We had no videotape, and the only film they had was a little bit of, I guess, 16 millimeter stuff that the news department used.
Yeah.
So I did live commercials, and we were just a great unit together because they'd go out and sell these commercials, and we'd set up a little sign in the studio, and you'd stand next to the sign, and you'd do live spots right in the network shows. There'd only be 30-second pieces. Then I did did the weather show there, and I did a little fishing show once a week. And then in about 1962, a show was created called Junior Auction.
Okay.
And the way it worked in Kansas City was that they sold potato chips from Kitty Clover Company, and on the back of these chips were little coupons. If you bought a small bag, it had like 5 coupons, or a denomination of 5. If you bought a big bag, it'd say 30. Buy a bigger bag, it'd say 50. So what kids would do is cut out these coupons and use them like money and come to the TV station and use them as money to buy prizes.
Yeah.
So in any case, Almar Fox Reshkin was the agency that handled that, and Bob Bernstein was one of the account executives.
Wow.
And so when they came to Columbia to put it on, I was the main guy down there as far as doing this kind of thing. So I contracted to do the show there. I think it paid $20 for a half-hour show. And I said, boy, I'd sure like to get the show in Kansas City. They said, well, we're hoping you'd do that too. So I said, man, that's really good. They said, it's going to be on Channel 4. So now I got a half-hour show every week on Columbia and a half-hour show on Channel 4 in Kansas City. And this, of course, is my goal. I thought, man, once I get to Kansas City, all these TV guys that I've been calling on for all these years, trying to get on their stations, I said, they're going to see, by God, I can do this.
There he goes.
Well, you think you're going to get discovered. I mean,
somewhere.
You got confidence in your ability, okay?
Sure.
You got to do it. So I go to my boss in Columbia, Missouri, Glenn Griswold, my old friend, and I said, Glenn, I hate to tell you, but I'm leaving. Oh, Fred, he says, we had a great relationship for 3 years. And he says, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to do Junior Auction in Kansas City, and I'm going to keep, he says, these shows don't last very long. And he says, what else you going to do? I says, when those guys up in Kansas City see me, I said, I think I'll get a job up there.
Yeah.
He says, well, I hate to see you go. So I left. And about 8 weeks later, the Junior Auction was off the air. And here I am with no job.
Oh,
because
wow.
I was not discovered.
Yeah.
But Bob Bernstein, with this small agency, he got me a couple of freelance jobs, and he also told the people at KBEA Radio, I think it was owned by Dickinson at that time, or was right in the process of selling. He told them about me, and they put me on as a radio announcer, and I worked at KBEA, KBY in Mission, Kansas for 4 years. My TV career was over. So I was on radio again. And
what was the format of KBEA at that time?
World's Most Beautiful Music.
Okay, and KBEY was kind of the underground.
Well, we simulcast.
Kind of thing. Did you? Okay.
Back in the 60s, we simulcast. It was all good music. We played John Gary, Frank Sinatra, Earl Wrightson, and a lot of strings, a lot of Boston pops.
Norman Luboff Choir.
Ray Conniff.
Ray Conniff, sure. Yeah.
And so I'm doing the radio there for a few years, and also I had an interest in auto racing because we lived on the east side, and we used to hear the races at Olympic.
It just so in Riverside.
That the guy at Olympic Stadium, at Riverside Stadium, his name was Tom, whatever, but Tom, he had to leave and go back to his home state of Indiana. Okay. Tom Parsons was his name.
Tom Parsons.
And the guy at Olympic Stadium, since I was over there all the time going to the races, and he knew I was on radio, says, you want to do the announcing? So I said, oh, God, great, yeah. So now I'm working Saturday and Sunday races, auto races, and working KBEA radio. And this went on 4 years until 1966. And in 1966, Dick Siley, who was the production manager of Channel 9, he was also a race fan. And he went to all the races out at Olympic Stadium. Had pretty classy races going on there. The Wells were there, and Bud Honeycutt, and Judd Larson, Bill Chenault, a lot of pretty well-known racers. And so anyhow, after the one night of racing out there, Dick Siley come up and said, you ever worked television before? I says, God, that's what I do. I says, I've been working television trying to get on at your station for years. He says, well, Len Dawson does our sports, as you know. He says, during the training season, Hank Stram doesn't want him doing the 6 and 10 o'clock news for like August and the first half of September or something like that, for like a 10 or 12 week period. He says, would you like to do it? I says, God, yeah. He says, well, we're going to have auditions for it. So I go down there, and this is God's truth. I was just a nervous wreck. Fortunately, they had everything on prompter, and I didn't have to say anything because I probably really gagged. Well, I went over there, and I read about 3 minutes a copy, and it came out fairly decent, I guess. And the next day, the general manager called me. His name was Mark Wadlinger. He later, I think, bought KBEQ radio.
Yeah.
But in any case, Mark calls me and he says, you're going to be my guy to replace Len Dawson. Man, I almost wet my pants. I mean, this was a dream come true. I didn't know if I was going to pay anything or whatever, but by God, I'm going to be on Kansas City television. I said, Mark, I've never put shows together. I said, I'm just an announcer. I said, I don't know how to edit the film or any of that stuff. I can't even write the script. I barely got out of high school. He says, don't worry. He says, John Sanders and Don Fortune will put it together for you. They've been doing it for Lenny for 3 years, so they can do it for you.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
They both auditioned for the deal, That didn't set too good
Yeah,
with
they
them.
didn't like that.
We became friends over the deal. So I did this for Lenny for about 2 months or 3 months, and then that came to an end. And then Mark Wadlinger said, I'm going to hire you as a reporter and put you in the newsroom. I said, Mark, I appreciate the offer, but I said, Claude Dorsey's a news guy, and I said, all those guys are journalists over there, and I said, I'm a show person. I said, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. He says, what do you do? I said, I do commercials, I do a kid show, weather show. He says, you do weather? I says, yeah. He says, you're my new weather
You're the weather
man.
guy.
All right.
So I got on the weather. That's how I got on.
Oh, man.
It was a lot more scientific back then doing the weather, right? I mean, you had to know everything about the weather, the fronts.
Do you really want to know?
Oh, man.
Back in those days, you could do.
It was a rip and read.
Well, I'll tell you how we did the weather. Okay, I'll try to be as brief as I can. The weather department was a piece of paper you had in your hand, and it was a picture of the map of the United States. It was outlined all the map. Here's how you got the highs and lows and the weather fronts. Call the weather service, the weather bureau at the time. Hey, Jack, this is Broski. Out Channel 9. Tell me where the highs and lows are, okay? There's a low over Sault Ste. Marie, and you're writing this down. There's a low over Sault Ste. Marie and another one down around Amarillo, Texas. Front between, a few showers on there, okay? High pressure over Atlanta, okay? You mark this down. That's your first map. Okay, where's it going tomorrow? He says, the high over Atlanta going to stay stationary. This low will move to Rochester, New York, and this low will move to Springfield. So you mark that down. The front between them, yeah. And then he says, okay, now there's an occlusion over here. I said, don't give me an occlusion. I says, I have no idea what occlusion is. And I'm the hell not going to try to explain this. People out there in the bowling alley or at the racetrack what an occlusion is. I said, I just don't know. He says, we also have some things going on at the upper level. I said, I don't want to know about the upper level. Just tell me what's going on the surface. And that's how we did it. And so then you'd have 2 minutes to fill on the air.
And then if you, what was the weather map like then? Was it just
Well,
was it the
the
magnetic things that stuck on the
state-
wall yet? Or?
Well, difference, no chroma key where
Yeah.
you stand in front of a green wall or a blue wall. There, at Columbia, Missouri, we had a big map right behind you that was the state of Missouri. It was about 7 or 8 feet tall, and little hooks by each city in there. And what you did was put address numbers on it. You go to the hardware store and you buy these things to put on your garage. My address is 15350.
Yeah.
So you'd buy those things. You'd say, okay, temperature in Columbia is 5.1. That's it.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Springfield, Missouri is 5.5. You'd put a couple of fives there.
Yeah.
Then for the next show, you'd change all these things. So nothing
I remember I
wrong-
was always so fascinated when they finally got to where they would put a little sunshine on the map and something with the camera would make it kind of twitter a little bit,
Yeah,
kind of move a little bit.
That's when they brought the electronics in.
Yeah, yeah.
But we had at Columbia, we had a glass covered map. We had a map with glass in front. We used a large felt tip pen.
Sure.
You put the ink in this felt tip pen and you'd write on it. Sometimes it'd kind of dry out and you push it a few times. Then a whole bunch of ink would come out at once.
Yeah.
And at Kansas City, we moved up in the world. They used a glass map, but you had a clown white. You know the clown white they put on a clown's face,
Sure,
make a white face. Well, if you take that stick and you keep it in the freezer, it gets really firm, and then you can write with it on a weather
I'll
map.
be darned.
And it works like a.
That is a trick I just didn't know.
That still may be useful today somehow. Yeah.
Clown thing.
The one thing, though, talking about weather people and the way it's changed now and all the technological and verbiage and 400 or 500 maps from around the world, we don't know what they mean and all kinds of stuff. What I do appreciate about the weather guy, what I experienced also, is everybody else is reading off teleprompter. The weather guy ad-libs for 2.5 minutes. He's the good talker. Or she. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that's
filled
what
a
you
lot of time.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you did cartoons too, if I remember.
Well, I did
right.
a lot of cartoons. I always try to do it a little different. I put a boutonniere on, and
That's right.
And I did cartoons, and that was part of. I was kind of my own worst enemy because I tried to make each show something really special. Like at 6 o'clock, I tried to draw one cartoon. Like a guy wanted some water, so his flowers were awful dry, or his garden was dry. Then at 10 o'clock, I'd try to do another cartoon. And after I do this for so many months, you can't just keep coming up with these new ideas all the time. And you do a good show, and then you try to top it the next time, and it can become a stress factor.
And you still have some of those drawings around, don't you?
Well,
Did I see you on a Joel Nichols interview showing some of those?
I have. We probably threw away 200 or 300 of them.
Yep.
But I probably have 200 or 300 of them at home, and they were down in the basement. And I told my wife, I said, I got to get rid of all this junk in the basement. She says, you're not getting rid of the cartoon. And I gave them to my boy. I said, here, you take them, you get rid of them. So Brian, he took them home, and he says, no, he says, these don't belong at home. They belong back at your house. So he brings them back there, and he framed about 30 or 40 of them, and he pastes them up all at the garage. And so.
You know, that might be an auction item, or, well, probably will go in the Fred Broski Museum.
I think it will be, yes. Yes. It's incredible. You wrote a book about all this back in 2017, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, through the years, people always ask you, how do you get in the business? And where did you go to learn to do this? And what happened when you went on television, something strange happened? And how do I tell my son or my daughter to get into the news business? And how did you get into it? Well, Ann Peterson, who used to be a co-anchor that I worked with at KCTV5 in Kansas City, one day she said, Fred, you ought to write a book about all your experiences. People always want to know about it because you've done so many different things. So I took that to heart, and as always, I procrastinated for a couple of years, and then finally I sat down and I just started writing this stuff out every night for about 4 or 5 months or so, and then I called a couple of good friends in the journalism business to help me out. Jim Overbay, he was our former news director. He kind of scanned it, made some corrections here, and then Gene Fox, who used to write for the Star, did sports with him down at Channel 5.
Writer, yeah.
He's written several books. He's a real cool guy. He's smart. So I says, okay, you do this part. So he did that. Next thing you know, I got a guy from Overland Park, Brad Moore. He helped me put together, and so finally we got it printed, and it came out, and we've sold about 700 books. And I figured we sell another 300, we'll break even. But I don't care. It was fun putting it out, and
you got it out there.
You had a good team together helping you out.
Sure did.
Yeah, we had a
team
good team.
from.
Now, can you still get your hands on that book today? Is it still available, or is it all in your garage, or where is it?
It was on the internet on a website, but we took that down.
Okay.
And you can buy it at Chrisman's Polish Sausage, Kansas City, Kansas.
That's good.
One of my
I get
favorite
all my good
Polish
books
sausage
there.
places. Chrisman's had, and also there's a place in Turner, Kansas called Christie's Tenderloins.
Really?
They have some of the books.
How are their tenderloins?
Yeah, Christie. Oh, their tenderloins are great.
Are they
man.
good?
They're huge. But horseradish, mustard, onion, they're great.
Those plate-sized tenderloins, I tell
So,
you. Well, that's cool.
Also, Overland Park Historical Society, Brad Moore runs that, and they do have the book. You can buy it through the mail, or you can buy it out at the Historical Society.
Is that the place that's at the King Louis Lanes
That's
now?
where King Louis used to be.
Yeah.
And the reason they have it is because we started our Bowling for Dollars show out there.
Sure.
At King Louis back in 1960.
Was that King Louis West?
King Louis West, yeah.
Oh,
Sunshine Strikes and Spares is the name of the book. Well, let's talk bowling. The whole bowling history. Now, you were after Bowling with Mullen, is that right?
Right. Sam Mullen had Bowling with Mullen. I think it was on Channel 9 for a number of years. I think it went off in the early 60s.
Okay.
The mid-60s. And then I was with Channel 9, owned by Metro Media, from 66 to 76 or so. But about 1969 or 70, the show from Plaster Productions. They're the same ones that created Junior Auction.
Right.
They also have they have
Romper
several,
Room.
but they're nationally syndicated shows, but locally produced. They come up with the idea and the format, and they get the local stations to put it together. Well, they create this thing called Bowling for Dollars. They figure the format out, and they tell you how to pick the bowlers and what to do, and you go into training. Well, we auditioned for this show. I happened to get it, and even though I wasn't a bowler, we used to hang around bowling alleys when we were kids, and a lot of my family members, aunts and uncles, were bowlers, and it was just always a fun place to go, So I loved the bowling show, and it started off. You have let's see, 2, 4, 7 bowlers every show. And they bowl, they get 2 strikes in a row, they win a jackpot. It progressively goes up $20 with every bowler. And that darn show got on the air, and it ran for 7 years.
Isn't that something?
We went through probably 11,000 or 12,000 bowlers in that time, and it was a staple for Kansas City television.
That was one of those deals where the viewers had a chit or some kind of they had a chance to win.
The viewers, right? They sent in
something.
People at home send in a pen pal card. They have their name, address, and phone number on there, and it goes in this big drum. Every time a bowler comes out, we spin the drum. They reach in. Hey, Joe Lewis up there in Gladstone. If whatever we win, we're going to share it with you.
You're playing with Joe Lewis. Oh, that's cool.
And so that's how it worked. And we got jillions of these cards. And I'm telling you, the post office made more money on this thing than anybody. It was really quite a show. And
now you bowled around in a couple bowling alleys, and then they put lanes in the KMBC studio.
Right. We started off in King Louis West, and we brought the whole crew out there and videotaped 8 shows on Saturday and 7 shows on Sunday, which is enough for 3 weeks run. 5 shows a night, 6:30 to 7, Monday through Friday. And we did that for about maybe 3 or 4 months to see how the show would take off. And the numbers were really, really good. They never gave us the numbers because the management always afraid if you saw the show was doing good, you'd want more money. And if the show was doing bad, well, you didn't want to feel bad that the show wasn't doing bad or whatever. I don't know. But they just didn't show us the numbers. Anyhow, the numbers had to be pretty good, so they come to the studios. We had a huge studio on Channel 9. I don't know, it was maybe 100-foot square or so. And the Brunswick people, they come in and they put 2 bowling lanes, right? They knocked the back wall out where the stagehand used to go sleep and play. You know? They put these 2 bowling lanes down there and built some risers, and all of a sudden we got 2 bowling lanes in the studio. And then every Monday, we'd have all these people come down here, and we'd do 3 bowling shows between 7 and 9 o'clock at night. Production costs went way down because instead of taking everybody out on remote location on their days off, they just did it on part of the regular shift. It was real easy. We did 3 shows Monday night, 3 shows Tuesday night. I'd do the weather at 6 o'clock, go in there and powder up a little bit, go out and do 3 shows, and then come back and do 10 o'clock weather. Do this for about 7 years and see if you don't go nuts, okay?
Wow.
People say, why are you so funny, Uncle Fred? Well, you don't know what it's like doing 3 bowling.
You still hear the sound of a bowling ball rolling down the aisle at night.
But it was really so much fun to have it in the studios because you got to realize we had Larry Moore down there and John Sanders and Fortune and Bob Worley and Gary Roberts and Charlie Gray. We had a bunch of great people, and Marilyn Morris was a great news gal.
I wonder when they tore that out of there.
Well, they tore it out about 1977 or 78.
Did they? Okay.
But we had all these guys from the newsroom, and like on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and on the weekends, we don't use those things. So like we'd get down there at 9:30 and get ready for the news. We got everything prepared. You'd holler at the stagehand, hey, man, turn on the machines. We'd turn the machines on. There's Lenny Dawson, get the bowling ball, going to practice bowling.
A little bowling.
Larry Moore goes up there and throw, and they'd bowl for 15 or 20 minutes before the news.
That's cool.
I mean, what great times to work in television.
Wow.
And here you got a Hall of Fame quarterback you're working with, and we'd play catch. Lenny always had a football around, and we'd play catch with all these guys. Glenn Hansen was there for a few years.
Oh, yeah, I remember Glenn.
It was just a riot. We're a great family, having a lot of fun together. And when Lenny threw the ball to you, boy, he'd toss it. It's real easy to catch. It came to you. It's just easy to catch. It just landed soft.
Yeah.
And then every now and then he'd say, here's one with a little bit of zip on it.
Here's like I really do.
I drill a hole right through you.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, I remember Charlie Gray well. He hung around a long time, didn't he?
Charlie
he was a great guy.
Here's what happened back in the early 70s. It's probably 71 or 72. The business was really going through a transition because all of a sudden everything was live. Now everything's going to videotape or audio tape cartridges for all the voiceovers and everything. So they started getting rid of all the announcers. They got rid of Harvey Brunswick and over at Channel 5 they got rid of Ken Coy, got Donnie Warnock and all these guys. They're just spinning them off.
Ken Motley.
Oh, yeah.
Murray Nolde gets
Johnny
thrown off at
Yates.
DAF.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Billieu at our place.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, they're all gone.
Yeah.
And it just happened like that in a year or two.
And Charlie came back on the air. Do you remember the channel? Was it 50 Fastcast or what? That was Bodine. got on that. No, Charlie was the
Charlie
last guy to put on the trench coat and go out there. It was a radio station.
Well, I worked with
Charlie-
Charlie on KCMO AM or WDAF AM.
Charlie
when
Gray?
he was there, Charlie Gray.
Yeah.
When he was the news director
And-
there,
and
and
he
I
would go
would
out-
sit in the office there with him, and I was doing music director for AM, and he'd be in there and harping about everything. And anytime the fire bell went off, he was out of there.
I'll tell you, he got there before the fire truck.
He did, yeah.
Charlie is a great news guy. I mean, he's
He
an
was.
old-fashioned, dyed-in-the-wool news guy.
He
And
was the hard-boiled reporter, man,
he's-
on the
he-
scene.
He was really a cantankerous guy. When they spun him off at Channel 9, and then he ended up as WDF radio news director, and I developed a friendship with Charlie. I did several shows with him at Channel 9 before he spun off. I was doing a noon show with him one time, and I had a lot of respect for all these news guys, but Charlie was a hard nut to crack. I just couldn't make a friend with him for a long time.
He was gruff.
I mean, he was
Once
like
you got to know him, he was a great guy.
just rough and gruff, you know. He's just
Yeah.
like one of your mean uncles. And no matter what I did, I could not crack that shell. And one day he introduced me on the air, and he says, "Well, here's Fred." He says, "Let's see if your weather forecast is any better than it was yesterday." So I get on. I said, "Folks, I want to tell you something. Charlie Gray's been wanting to do this weather for years, but so far he hasn't memorized these states." And that broke the ice, and I'm telling you, I looked over at him and he gave me a thumbs up. And we were the best buddies ever since that time. And I'll tell you how this was probably in 1967 or 68. I was doing quite a bit of freelance announcing at that time, and I had a little one-man ad agency out of my house. And Charlie Gray lived right next to an advertising guy for Bellis Hess, the warehouse over in North Kansas City. Bellis Hess was
National
a big
Bellis Hess.
national mail order house like Montgomery Ward's.
Yeah.
And this neighbor next door to Charlie comes over to him. They're out cutting the grass one day, and he says, "Charlie," he says, "we got to dispose of all this old merchandise. We're going to go bankrupt." He says, "Can you tell me any advertising agency guy that I can trust to get with it?" He says, "I've known a lot of advertising people. Says there's only one guy in the advertising business I'd trust." He says, "Well, who is that?" He says, "That's Fred Broski." I couldn't believe it. This guy calls me, and I'm just small potatoes. I'm working with the Olathe car dealers and Shuko's House of Lamps, little dinky places, because I'm not a full line agency. I go out and write the spots, and then I do the spots. This guy calls me, and I go over to Bellis Hess, and he says, "Okay, we want to get rid of all this merchandise, and you'll be our ad agency." And he says, "Don't worry about collecting the money. I'll walk you right down to the bookkeeper, so you won't have to worry." And those guys, they spent a whole bunch of money in about a year that really helped our deal. I mean, they were on television almost every day for 3 months, and it was a great account to have. And Charlie was responsible for that.
Sure.
I tried to buy Charlie lunches and everything else because we'd go out to lunch. He says, "You took care of a friend of mine." He says, "That's good enough." And I said, "Well, I'd like to pay you something." He says, "No." We went out to Rosedale Barbecue since it was close to WDF. We used to go out there once in a while and get a short end.
Yeah.
We get a short end. He says, "Man, that thing's really good." He says, "Let's get another one, the strawberry pop to go get it." So we each get another short end. And we're getting full, 2 short ends. I said, "I got a couple of calls to make, Charlie." This is 1975 or so, long time. "I got to go, Charlie." He says, "Fred, let's split a short end." So we each ate 2.5 short ends.
Wow. You talked to us early before we started recording. I wanted to get that story again about you getting into the billiards hall, the pinball machines, and all that kind of stuff. What was the deal on that as a kid growing up?
That's a part of a misspent youth. It's just I used to love to caddy, and of course caddies like to play golf. And when you're doing this, you're 12, 13, 14 years old. I lived at 23rd and Van Brunt Boulevard on the east side. Right down at 24th, it was Vic's Pool Parlor. But I couldn't get in because it was too young. But right there at the window you could look in, there's guys playing pinball machine every night. A bunch of old guys, 20s and 25, 30 years old. Yeah. They're playing these pinball machines. Man, I wanted to play that so bad. And you see the pool tables over there. I'd never played pool before. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be a big guy, be like the grown-ups. And so eventually I got to be 16 and could get in there. And so I worked in the pool hall, racked balls and cleaned the tables. And matter of fact, I was racking balls and cleaning tables when I went out and drove up to St. Joe one time and auditioned for a job, and I ended up going racking balls and doing TV commercials. Crazy world sometimes. I don't think you could do that now.
You never, this kind of thing never happened, did it? Where you did bowling for dollars, but as a kid you were a pin setter in a bowling alley. No. Boy, what a dream story that would have been.
No, I'll tell you, I hurt my knee when I was about 15 years old, and I never did bowl because every time I try to bowl a ball, I'd twist my knee pretty bad.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
how's
love
your
the
pool
bowling
game
show.
now?
Do what?
You still got a pool game?
I don't play pool. I've got a couple of real nice cues. I had a billiard table and also had a 5x10 pool table, but I never did play for the past. I sold both my tables and I don't play anymore. But I was just an average player, but I loved the game.
Did you ever buy a pinball machine for your
Never
home?
did buy a pinball machine.
Yeah,
No.
that would have been good.
I got into electronic games. I played Pong for about a couple of weeks, and that was enough for me.
You're not into any more. You don't do Fortnite or anything, any of the online
No
games.
video games for me.
Yeah.
I don't even own a smartphone.
Okay. Well, let's
All
talk
right.
about Fred Broski, the artist.
Pardon me?
You were an oil painter?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm not really an artist, but when I was a kid, I painted a couple of pictures, and I always wanted to do a little oil painting.
Yeah.
But because of my career and I was so focused on broadcasting and recording and things like this, I put it off. I put it off until I finally got out of the business and I started painting a little bit when I was about 55 years old. And I painted maybe 80 or 100 pictures, and now I procrastinate. I've got an easel, I've got all my paints ready to paint, and I'm going to try to get back this afternoon if I can.
Oh, well, that's good.
You got any halfway done ones?
Oh, yeah, I've got several of them that have started. I've got probably 10 of them that started. I got polar bears and still lifes, and I got pictures of them. My mom I've been working on, but I haven't finished any of them, and they're in progress for the last year or two. You know, when you're not an accomplished artist and you're just experimenting all the time, it's not that you can just sit down and create this stuff. It'll drive you nuts, you know. If you try to mix the right color and you put it up there and you see it's wrong shade, it's the wrong color, and then I get frustrated. And then sometimes I don't ever get that picture finished. And sometimes I get a picture I really like.
Well, you know, as you get older, it's so much harder to see those numbers on the paint by numbers things.
Ain't it the truth?
There was no mixing on those, was there? It was either this color, that color, this color, that color.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I did a couple of those long time ago.
Well, Fred, you did the hat trick then, 4, 5, and 9, right?
Yeah, 4 was very short.
But you were there.
Yeah, I worked there for just that short period.
I don't imagine too many people have done the hat trick in Kansas City.
No, I never did anything on 41 other than a couple of commercials. I did commercials.
That was later, though.
A couple of brothers ran the programming, general manager and program director at Channel 4, Bob and Bill Wormington. I don't know if you remember them.
They were there when I was there at All Night Live on 41.
But these guys, they really ran a pretty tight ship down there. And I'm trying to get on as a staff announcer. This is back in the early 60s. I can't break the shell. It was just tough because the business is going through this transformation. Each station in the country had 5, 6, 7 staff announcers. Next thing you know, they have 3, 4 staff announcers, then 1 or 2. Well, it's hard to get on when they're cutting down all the time. So.
Now, who were the characters? Everybody of a certain age remembers these big personalities that were people used to keep a job for quite a while on the local stations. Who were your best friends in the media? Who were the...
You mean guys that I worked with?
Yeah.
I got awfully close to Larry Moore. Larry Moore and I are very, very close. And also Charlie Gray and I we spent a lot of lunches together. Jim Overbay was a reporter at Channel 9. He went on to become news director at Channel 5. To this day, we still have lunches together with our families, and I'm very close to him. Don Fortune, I've done a lot of shows with him. Leif Lysick, he started off at Channel 5 as an intern in sports. He did a lot of sports shows, and I'm kind of phasing out my broadcasting when Leif comes there in the mid-'80s. All I'm doing is a lottery show and a few things like that. So Leif is really interested in golf, and I hadn't played but once a year or so for years after caddying a lot when I was a kid. So we started playing golf together. Man, we had a ball. We wasted about 15 years of good time just playing golf. And we'd go out every week and play 2 days a week. And in the winter months, we'd go out to Phoenix and play like 10 or 15 days in a row. We played 36 holes a day. And finally, when I got in, and when I got in my 60s, I told him, I said, enough's enough.
Now, where were you playing?
We played at Shirky's a lot. We played at Tomahawk. We played a lot at Albemarle. We played there.
Oh, good course.
We managed to play at Sunflower and up at Parkville, Smithville, the 2 courses up at Smithville. Yeah,
now, you had a nice, wholesome image, but back then there was a little bit of drinking and stuff going on in that business.
Not a lot of drinking.
There's got to be some crazy stories.
Well, we down at Channel 9, we would have to, when we got off the news, sometimes it's a stressful factor. These guys are working, trying to get their film edited and everything. Usually not too much for the weather guy, but if you do a couple of commercials and a lot of booth voiceovers, and you do a couple of weather shows and 3 bowling shows, you want to drink at 10:30. So we'd go over to Jerry's across the street, and there was a Jerry's bar that was a real nice place. We would meet there, 2 or 3 nights a week. We didn't say we're going to the bar. We said we're going to choir practice. And that's what a lot of guys told their wives, we're going to choir practice. We'd go over there and we'd stay there for 45 minutes or an hour or so. But I don't have too many crazy stories about the guys that I could really tell you. But one thing on Bowling for Dollars, there's this young gal. I interviewed her briefly, and I sent her up on the bowling lanes. This is Channel 9. Right next to the approach, there's a ball return over here, old-fashioned deal. The ball rolled down and comes up this ball return, and the ball sits there. People make the delivery towards the pin, and they throw the ball down in their right foot. A lot of times they'd come up and hit this ball return and go bang. The bowlers aren't supposed to hit that, but they do once in a while. Well, I introduced this gal. I said, okay, Mary's going to go two in a row. Here she goes, and she throws the ball down there, and I hear this bang. And, my mind's going a mile a minute. I'm watching the pins. I got stuff I'm worried about, who the pen pal is. I said, oh, man, I hope she didn't hurt herself. And bang, the pins go down. I said, well, here. And she comes back, and she's all red-faced and everything. I says, Mary, what's wrong? I says, you didn't get the strike. I'm sorry about it. I says, did you hurt yourself? And she says, I want to go home or something like that. I said, okay, I'm befuddled. I have no idea. And so I said, we'll be back after this break. So I sign off, and we go black for a minute, and I look up in the audience. Man, these people are roaring. I said, what did I do? This one guy, he does this. He goes like, I says, what do you mean? He says, she farted on the air. I said, oh, man, that's the bang I heard. And he says, but that wasn't the funny part. I said, what do you mean? He says, the funny part was, you asked her about it on TV. It was kind of embarrassing for both of us.
That's great. And didn't I see the story one time about a guy that showed up drunk? Did a little drinking?
Yeah, that's one guy. Okay, he works at Armco Steel. I think he worked on the nail machine down there. He tells his boss he's going to get off at 4 o'clock. And he says, hey, boss, I want to be on that bowling show tonight. I'm not going home. The guy says, really? He says, what time do you have to be there? He says, 6:30. I got to be at Channel 9. He says, good. He says, go on over and buy you a drink, get you reared up for the TV station. So he goes over to the local bar, and his boss buys him a drink, and then his buddy buys him a drink. By the time he gets down Channel 9, he's had 5 or 6 Jack Daniels, and he's 4 sheets to the wind. And so this blue door opens up, and I says, well, here comes Charlie Miller from Armco Steel. The door flies open, and he just walks out like this and says, hey, Fred, how you doing? I said, here's your pen pal. Go up there and bowl, Charlie.
Did you know any of the kid show hosts? Did you run across Tori? And I mean, I heard he was a great guy, but old Gus was a bad drinker.
Tori and old Gus were talented.
Old Gus was a jerk, wasn't he?
He was not a dirty old man. Tori was a great talent. He did a lot of radio stuff, and he had a real sharp mind. See, the radio guys like Wilson and Tori and Murphy and Dan Henry, these guys, Randy Miller's another one. These guys, you see them in person, and their mind's going like this all the time. I mean, they can do 3 hours. It's 3 hours. I do 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I have to stop. These guys go on. You can just see their minds.
Kind of improv guys, really.
Yeah, they're so good. Tori was great. Another guy could do anything was Frank Wizzardo.
Wizzo. Wizzo Dog was kind of bad, though. He drank too, I heard. Tell us a Wizzo story if you have any.
Wizzo. he liked to put on a show, as you know, okay? When I was doing the booth announcer, I'd intro his show or do a commercial or something, then I'd go out and watch him. I just loved live television. Wiz would be doing a show, and a couple of times he'd do something, boy, man. And I know I'd be picked up on the mic. God, I got to keep it down, Freddie. Then when they go to a commercial or something, I said, Wiz, I said, I'm sorry, I left it. I said, oh, no. He says, always react. He says, I live for that. He said, don't force it. He says, I do that. But Wizzo, he was also, Frank Wizzardi, he was also a director. And he was an MC. He used to MC a lot of the shows down at the old Tower Theater when they did burlesque and vaudeville and that kind of stuff. And when we'd just record a commercial, he'd be up at the director's console. He'd say, okay, Frank Thomas, the stagehand, he says, get it set up over there. We'll take camera 3, then we'll go to 2, and we'll roll in about 5 minutes. He'd just say, okay, Fred, go out there and stand, or Johnny Bill, you go out there with Fred and do this. It's just simple stuff. But now all of a sudden, there's a group of people taking a tour. So there's 12 people standing there at the control room. Now we're going to do the same thing. He says, okay, videotape, we'll roll this on high band videotape color. We'll take it on 1, stand by. Make it sound like Universal Studios.
Yeah, that's fun. Good.
I'll tell you something. I don't know if you know Bill Hare. He was a director at Channel 9, one of my very dear friends. We lost him a few years ago. But he was one of these directors that was really nervous. I mean, you could just see it all the time he was up there. It was live television, good reason to be nervous. But he's always tense up there. We're doing the Kansas City Philharmonic show, and we've got all these musicians out there. Hans Svigers conducted the orchestra, and I got a closing. I got a 30-second close. Production of Kansas City Live, Kansas City Philharmonic Orchestra, that's Hans Svigers conducted. And I can see Bill in the control room here through the glass, and I'm getting over it. It's a pretty big deal. I'm getting ready to do the closing. He hollers at me, he says, Freddie, he says, you got to do this show quick. He says, we're running too long. He says, you got to do it in 8 seconds.
Whoa,
I said, Bill, it's a 30-second deal. I can't do it. I just can't do it. He says, you got to do it in 5 seconds. And I said, Bill, I can't get all the credits. And he says, go. I said, it's Fred Broski speaking.
Thanks for watching. Yeah. Wow.
And that was the show. They taped this show on these huge reels. I think it was 2-inch or 4-inch videotape. Yeah. Each one of these reels weighed about 15 pounds. It was an hour and a half reel. And they took the thing in the videotape room, these huge machines, they're bigger, like 2 washing machines. And the engineer took this, and normally you store it over here where you save it. For some reason or other, he took it and he put it on the eraser and he degaussed it. Or degaussed it, he erased it, he deleted it.
Right. We know what that word means. We older guys know what degaussing is.
And so that was all erased in an hour and a half, and they couldn't redo it. So I think
Yeah. You know, when I was at KCMO in the early 70s, they still had the acetate machines back by the back door that they would cut the audio in and cut the acetates right there, and that's the way they played it back. So quite a deal, yeah. Good stories, good tales.
When I was at Columbia, Missouri, you know, we're talking about the announce booth. A lot of people don't know what it is. Well, the old-fashioned TV stations, every one of them had a room that was maybe 10 feet square, 6 feet square, just a small room with a couple of monitors in it. And any time you heard a voice and you didn't see the announcer, they probably originated from that voice. They had real good microphones. Columbia, Missouri, we had a student was with the J School, because we had a lot of journalism students there. Great-looking guy, great voice. His real name was Del Wade, but he went by Duke Wade. When he'd go on the air and announce, he'd always use his big boy voice. Okay, here's the latest news, and he'd talk like this when he's just normally talking. Then when he'd sign off every bit that he'd put on the air, he'd always end, "This is Duke Wade reporting." He'd always end like that. Okay, and he's doing this in the booth when it's part of the news show. This is just the audio part. Okay, so one time they had the city elections, and here comes Duke, and here sitting right next to me, and slides come up and say the city dog catcher is so-and-so won that, and the county did this, and the new mayor is so-and-so, and he says, and that's the latest from the shitty elections.
Oh yeah.
And all of a sudden, boy, you see everybody in control room, they just stop like this, And he stops, and he just points his finger, go. And I opened the mic and I said, that was Duke Wade reporting. He didn't talk to me for a couple of weeks.
That's funny.
Which one did you, now it's live TV, you did it for so long. What are some of the goofs that you still remember?
The goofs that what?
The goofs that you made that you still remember. Were there any of them that just, you couldn't get over it?
Well, when I first got into business, I did break up a lot. As a matter of fact, I broke up quite a bit on Channel 9 because sometimes the stagehands or some of the other announcers, they'd break up. Like Larry Moore one time, he enters me, he says, I don't know how I ended up with this Italian sportscaster fortune and a Polak weatherman doing this. And I started laughing, see. And I really had a difficult time getting through the deal. And he really got in trouble for that. In Columbia, Missouri, I don't know if it was Huntley, Brinkley. At 6:15, you take the hour at 6 o'clock, we did local news, 6 to 6:15. National news comes 6:15 to 6:30. Everything live. We had news and weather at 6 to 6:15, and either Huntley, Brinkley, or Swayze, or Chancellor, or somebody like that did the 6:15. I don't remember who it was, but it was one of those top teams. And I did the weather show at 6:10 to 6:12, and then I had to do a live commercial at 6:14:30 to 6:15. And it's live, and I got to get it done in 30 seconds. And it was only like a 20-second script, so it allowed me to do a little movement. It was for the Beverage House, which was a place that sold beer and liquor, sporting goods, worms, and minnows. It was a complete store out on Old 40 Highway in Columbia, Missouri. So here I go. Hi, Fred, for the Beverage House. If you're going to do some hunting, here's a nice Winchester shotgun for you. Good. If you're going to do some fishing, here's a nice Garcia rod and reel. Oh, that's a good one. Now you're going to do some swimming, here's some swim fins. And I go, arr, arr, arr. Like a seal. And the camera shook. And Pete Bretz was a camera guy. He looked out the side of the camera and he said, God. And I started laughing. I can't finish the commercial. And I run about 30 seconds long. And now we enter the network show.
Okay.
In progress.
We join the show in progress.
In the studio. Everybody just laughing like crazy. I got tears coming out of my eyes. And it was a disgrace. I was supposed to be a professional announcer, but it happens. And so I go back to my booth chair and I sit in there. Oh, God, I'm glad that thing's over. Now, of course, the phone rings. You could tell by the way it was ringing, it was angry, you know. Hello? This is Griswold. Your boss, your general manager. I want to talk to you about that spot. I said, Glenn, it was really funny. You should have been here. He says, I'll see you at 9 o'clock in the morning in my office. I said, Glenn, I work the late shift. I don't get out of here until midnight or after. He said, make it 8 o'clock. So I got there at 8 o'clock in the morning and got chewed out royally.
Yeah, wow. Oh, man. The great stories from how many years total would you say? What's your broadcast year count?
Well, my first job in broadcasting was about 1956, and my last thing on the air, well, actually, I did a spot about a year ago.
Yeah.
But for working for a TV station, it was 1998. But full-time, I ended in 1984. But it's interesting about my career. A lot of people think I've worked a long time for for a station, but I've never worked for more than 4 years at a time on a 40-hour week. I worked for Channel 8 in Columbia 3 years. I worked for KBEA 4 years. I worked for Channel 9 4 years. Quit them, went back, worked 3 years, then worked 2 years bowling. Did part-time 1979. Worked full-time for Channel 5, 80 to 84, and then left that and did part-time. So I've got kind of a checkerboard career. But even though I wasn't working full-time for the stations, I did a lot of commercials back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and people, they see you, they still think you're working at the station.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It was the 80s I was working. I'll tell you this story. I think I was doing the weekend weather with a female anchor. Doesn't make a difference, female or male, but it just happened to be a female anchor. And we're getting ready to go into the break to cue my weather show. And she said, we understand there's been a gigantic erection in the Pacific Northwest, and there may be several injured and possibly fatalities. We'll be back in a moment. we go to a break, and I tell her, I said, you said there was going to be a gigantic erection, or there was a gigantic erection. I says, it's eruption. I says, tremendous difference. I says, but this time of night, I says, a lot of people are eating popcorn, drinking beer. They don't hear us word for word. I said, don't worry about it. So we come back on here after the break. I said, don't say anything. She says, well, we're back. I said erection. I meant to say eruption. Now here's Fred with the weather. So now try to do 3
Well
minutes.
handled.
Oh, man. Wow.
That's beautiful.
Gosh. Any other stories we're missing out on that we haven't talked to you about?
Well, you got a couple of days.
Was Cheryl Jones doing weather?
Cheryl Jones,
When
she
you were-
replaced me in 74. When I left in 74 at Channel 9, she replaced me, and then she stayed there for 3 or so years, went to CNN, a couple of other stations.
There was that one. That was that one period where I didn't miss you. I just wanted to tell you.
I want to tell you about
However, you missed part of the state of Missouri when she
yeah,
was on.
I
So-
love Cheryl.
I'm an old guy. Before I lose my train of thought, I want to tell you about Wendell Anschutz and Ann Peterson, Don Fortune, myself. We're working together as a team, which was really a fun group. It was just as much fun as working with Larry and Lenny and those guys. But we always had fun no matter where we worked. But anyhow, Fortune and I were always kind of competing with each other and bugging each other all the time. And he knows I didn't know anything about the weather. I just talk about the weather. We're closing out the news show, and there's some heavy thunderstorms out around Salina, and we had a couple of seconds to kill, and he looks over at me. All the mics are open, and he says, "Hey, Fred, give me an explanation of how that thunderstorm built up out around Salina." I got no idea. All I know is there's a cold
Don
front
was
out there,
mean.
and I start to say something, and Wendell knows it. Whatever I say is going to be stupid. So he says, "Fred, hold it right there." He says, "Scientific explanations become quite lengthy. So since we're on tight time parameters, hold that answer till a later date." I says, "That's right, Wendell. I'll do that."
I'll hold that.
But that's why it was so great working with guys like Larry and Wendell, because they'd give you a string and you go out, and then all of a sudden, guys like me, we end up at the end of a string, and they always pull you back. They save you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Because we're not always under control.
Wow.
So I was doing a show with Harold Ensley one day when I was just doing weekend weather, and somebody said, "Hey, we ought to go out and see Harold Ensley, talk to him about fishing and growing tomatoes," because he was quite a gardener. And so he was always one of my heroes. I just loved Harold. Just God Almighty,
Did you ever go on a trip with him?
We do what?
Did you go fishing with Harold ever?
No, I never did go fishing with him. He had asked me several times, but his kind of fishing and my kind of fishing are different.
Yeah.
I set out limb lines. We have a beverage once in a while, and we stay up to wee hours in the morning. It's a long story, but anyhow, we're out there at Harold's house, and he's got his station wagon out front. We go out to the back.
A Ford Country sedan.
Yes.
Oh, you got it.
Wood
Yeah.
covered.
And the reason I love doing a show with Harold was because when you're doing an interview, a lot of times I don't know what to say if I just don't have all the notes in my mind sometimes, isn't quick enough. But with Harold, you'd say, "Harold, these are great tomato plants." He could fill a half hour. I mean, instantly, and all you'd have to, "Yeah, okay, that's neat, Harold." And then he could fill the time, which is great stuff, and he was always entertaining. We're supposed to do 3 to 4 minutes, and the producer, after the first show, he said, "You got to run longer." He said, "The guy is really good." So he has let me run about 6 minutes to 6.5 minutes for a 2-minute weather show, which is really cool. So I think we were on 8 to 7:30 to 9:30, something like. We had to hit the network at 9:30. So we do 45-15, 45-15. Then we're coming back to our closing show. Bob Thill was the anchor guy. They call out and say, "Freddie, we're going to let you close the show with Harold. You guys sit on the tailgate of his wagon." Man, that's great. So they said, "We're going to come to you at 25 after the hour." He says, "But you got to be off by 29:30. We're going to do a 30-second chain break and hit the network." He says, "You got to be off by then, Freddie, because we've got to hit the network." So I tell Harold, because Harold doesn't have headsets on or anything. He's just talking and having fun. So Harold, here's the deal. We can talk 4.5 minutes, don't have to do anything about the weather. We just talk about maybe Table Rock or something like that. I said, when I got 30 seconds to go, I said, "I'll have my arm behind you and I'll just tap you on the shoulder." And I said, when I do that, wrap it up. And then I can just wrap it up. I said, I'll have 20 or 30 seconds left. He says, go to chain break. They put a slide up and they go to network. He says, oh, no problem, Fred. So he says, okay, here we go. He says, hey, you know, I was fishing down there around Shell City, Missouri one time. I said, can't tell you how big these crappie were. He says, we're catching them running 14, 14 and a half, 15 inches, one right after another on a little white and purple jig. I said, that's really neat. They said, 1 minute. He says, then, you know, we figured if they're biting here, there, we ought to go up to Truman, up by the dam. Maybe they'll go up there. And now the guy says, 30 seconds. And so I tapped him on the shoulder. He says, and you know, we caught those crappie down there at Truman. And I was thinking, I'm thinking of J.D. Fletcher down at Table Rock. Now the guy says, 20 seconds, Fred. So I hit him on the back. And he just keeps on going. And then finally, the guy says 10 seconds, and I was kind of halfway push him. I thought I was going to push him off the dang edge of the deal. And he said, Fred, you know, we had a heck of a trip. I'll see you next time. I said, thanks, Cheryl. Good day from there. And bam, we hit the net on time.
Once again, and I'm Fred Broski. And away you win.
He was a great guy.
Yeah,
I loved Harold.
Celebrity-wise, you know, they always ask any of us that have been in the media, what celebrities did you meet? Anybody come through the station you had a chance to shake hands with? Or
Well, I met Loy Edge and I met Dick Wilson.
Yeah, we've heard about that. Are they still in jail? I think.
But as far as national people, it's a matter, you meet them through your business, but a lot of people say, oh, you're friends with them. You're not friends with them. You meet them and say hi or shake their hand one time,
right.
And that's it. But I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of people. I found out most of them were pretty darn nice. I met Vincent Price when he was passing through Columbia, Missouri. I did a show with Paul Newman at the old Show-A-Rama in Kansas City, one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. Jack Lemmon and Ann Margaret and Christopher Reeves.
Yeah.
I met a lot of them. And
very cool.
So I've met a few from time to time, but the real friendships you have are the ones that are nourished over the years, like with some of our broadcasters here.
Sure. Well, you've given us some great times through the years, and we want to thank you for sitting down and tell us some stories here today. We appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine.
Huh? What a deal. Fred
You want to start a
Broski.
show some? I was thinking on our way down here, we might get a lot of the stations in the Midwest to tie in together. We'll start a show every night at 10:30.
There you
I'll
go.
be your announcer. You guys host the show, and I introduce it.
I got you. Okay, good.
I want to work Broski in.
Done deal. Okay.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Okay.
You might love it, you might hate it. It's my favorite freaking show.